What's up, ladies and gentlemen of the interweb? So first things first, I'm not showing gameplay for Resident Evil 2 for this video because most people haven't finished the game yet. It's only been out just over 24 hours. So if you haven't finished it, I'm not going to spoil it for you just in case I'm further along in it because I've already completed the first two A chapters. I'm in the B side now, so I just don't want to spoil it, so I hope you understand. So we're using unrelated gameplay. But with that being said, after playing Resident Evil 2, both as Claire and Leon, I 100% am ready to say that Resident Evil 3 Remake, it needs to be rushed. It needs, or not rushed, but it needs to be announced soon. We already know, thanks to Capcom's employees, that they're currently working on the game. We're just waiting for Capcom to formally say, hey guys, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis is coming remade to a console near you. And I have some theories about that, which is what this video is about. So let's be serious for a second. After Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil hit a hard downslope. I enjoyed Resident Evil 5 and 6. Most people do not. One thing everybody agrees on is Resident Evil 7 is a horrible game. It brought back the horror, which was good, but everything else about that game was horrible. The control style was horrible. Why would they put Resident Evil in first person? It makes no sense. Why is Chris Redfield there when Chris Redfield has no reason to be there? Again, it makes no sense. But with that being said, Resident Evil 2 has successfully rebooted the franchise. If you haven't been on Twitch lately or YouTube, everywhere is flooding with Resident Evil right now. Resident Evil is being watched by more people right now than Fortnite, and that is saying a whole lot. Whenever a game beats Fortnite, it's huge. The last game to beat Fortnite after Fortnite blew up in about November 2016, or November 2017 I mean, was Red Dead Redemption. That was the only game in almost 2 years to beat Fortnite on viewership. And now Resident Evil is beating Fortnite on viewership, and that is huge. So I'm going to go ahead and say my little statement. Resident Evil 2 has definitely sold at least 3 million copies in its first couple days. I will be surprised if it doesn't. But with that being said, Resident Evil 3 Remake can bolt the series into a whole new light. If you remember when the original Resident Evil 3 came out, it came out right at the end of the PlayStation 1 and the Nintendo 64. And right now, we're at the very end of the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. According to all rumors, Xbox launches at the end of this year and PlayStation launches in the spring of next year. According to rumors, that could not be true. It could just be a bunch of random YouTubers with 30,000 subscribers just going off on random stuff, but you never know. So let's just run with that for a second. Capcom stated in 2018 that they want a new Resident Evil, Devil May Cry, and Mega Man every single year. I don't know if they meant as in Resident Evil this year, Devil May Cry next year, then Mega Man, or all three in the same year every single year. And if they were to do that, then Resident Evil 3 Remake would be our Resident Evil for 2020, and that is a very big deal. You might be saying they can't turn it around that quick. I say yes, they can, because they already have everything they need. They have the police station. They have most of the worlds already created, or most of the area already created that you would have gone to in Resident Evil 3. It would take them maybe 6 more months to finish up the rest of the worlds to make Resident Evil 3 work. They have the enemies. They can just copy and paste the enemies into Resident Evil 3. No one's gonna complain. They have the structure. They have the scripts and programs to make everything work. They have Claire. They can take Claire and just pull her model and put in the model for Resident Evil 3 and just tweak it enough to make it look a little bit different. But they could do that, and we could have Resident Evil 3 Remake this time next year. Same with the Tyrant. They could take the Tyrant's programming, swap his model for a new version of Nemesis, and then add in new animations, add a running cycle, and this, that, and the other, and wada bing, wada boom, we got our Nemesis. It wouldn't take that long for them to do that. They could, it would take a while, but they could easily turn this around for an early 2020 release date, because for all we know, from what the Capcom developers, employees said, Resident Evil 3 Remake went into production in summer of 2018. So they have half a year in production time already. So that means if they take the rest of this year, that'll be a 1.5 year turnaround for Resident Evil 3 Remake in 2020, if it comes out in spring when the PlayStation 5 is speculated to release. But if it was to come out at the end of this year when the new Xbox is speculated to release, then maybe, just maybe, we could have a new Resident Evil at the end of this year too. Although I think that's pretty unlikely. I do think the new Xbox and PlayStation are going to be 2020 launches and the holiday season. So that's when I expect Resident Evil 3 Remake to launch, but hey, that's just my opinion. Resident Evil 2 Remake has already been a huge success among Resident Evil fans and newcomers alike. One thing everybody unanimously agrees on is the gameplay of Resident Evil 7 is trash. It doesn't make any sense. But Resident Evil 2, everybody that has touched it has fallen in love with this game so far. Even people who don't even like Resident Evil are enjoying this game. Because what's happened since Resident Evil 2 originally released, actually let's just say since Resident Evil 4, is games like Outlast has blown up. Games like Soma. I mean, Soma not so much, but it has some horror aspects from what I've heard. I've never played it. But there's a lot of horror games popping up left and right that people are enjoying. And Resident Evil 2 is the epitome of horror games. There was not a good horror game until Resident Evil popped up. And then once Resident Evil popped up, Silent Hill started to take off. Parasite Eve started to take off. Everyone and their mother was making horror games. Even Nintendo got in on the action making horror games with Geist. And Nintendo licensed out Capcom to make Resident Evil Nintendo exclusive for a little bit. I don't think that was a good idea looking back in hindsight, but that is the sole reason Resident Evil 4 blew up, because of the GameCube, so it does make sense. But with that being said, this is still about Resident Evil 3 Remake. I really do believe it's coming. I really do believe the success of Resident Evil 2 is going to lead it to come to full fruition. If you think about it, Capcom didn't fully announced Resident Evil 2 until 2018, but the developers came out and told us that Resident Evil 2 was in production, and I believe 2013 or 2015. It was one of those 2 years. So just like what happened last year, the employees came out and told us, hey guys, we're working on Resident Evil 3. So Resident Evil 3 is in production. We're just waiting on Capcom now. I hope it's not 2023 when we get the next Resident Evil remake, but if we were to get Resident Evil 8 next year, and then maybe 2021, I guess, get some kind of remake, like halfway remake of like Operation Raccoon City, and then have 2022 be like Resident Evil 9, or then 2023 be Resident Evil 3, that's kind of unlikely that it would be in that route. I'm not sure how it's going to play out. We do know Resident Evil 3 is in production. We do know Resident Evil 8 is in production. Which one is going to come first? That's up to anyone's guess. If it is true that they do want to make a new Resident Evil every single year, then that means there has been 2 years, almost 3 years by the time it launches, for the Resident Evil 8 campaign and the Resident Evil game itself to release. So if that was a 2020 release, and then they took 2.5 years, 3 years for 2021 for Resident Evil 3 remake, I would be okay with that, because the way it would work out is Resident Evil 8 would launch in 2020, let's just say January 2020. At that point, they will go immediately into production for Resident Evil 9, because that's how Capcom works. Resident Evil 8 went into immediate production as soon as Resident Evil 7 went gold. So at that point, they could finish out Resident Evil 3 Remake for the other team, and then once that team finishes Resident Evil 3 Remake, they could move on to Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City Remake. And then after Operation Raccoon City, move on to Code Veronica, move on to Resident Evil 4, move on to the actually not the Umbrella Chronicles, what am I thinking? But they could have, realistically, a good Resident Evil game every single year. This is something that could happen. I want it to happen. We need it to happen. Is it going to happen? That's anyone's guess. At this point, I'm just speculating, because all we really know is that Resident Evil 8 and 3 are in production. But after Resident Evil 2, I 100% think that it is time for Resident Evil 3 Remake to be announced at this year's E3. Did you enjoy the video? What do you think about it? Let me know in the comments down below. Try not to die. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.